An eighth-grade girl comes home from school and says, "Mom, I'm pregnant." Well, her mom immediately faints and starts crying, but the daughter says, "Come on, Mom, don't worry, I was just joking." "I got an F in physics," and her mom replies, "Oh my God, thank you, Lord. I don't care about that F at all." So why am I telling you this old joke? It's actually about Trump and Davos. You'll understand if you watch. There will be a real punch, as they say, a hoof to the forehead, right before the very end. I swear on my mother, as my Georgian relatives, well, my wife's relatives say, when they want to promise something that no one in the Russian-speaking internet has noticed. Probably the most interesting thing for me in Trump's speech in Davos was that he slapped the socialists in the face. There are countless of them in Europe, as they say, like unplucked chickens, those who run the European Union, their so-called Euro Union. Do you want to know why your economy, Trump said, is on the verge of collapse? It's all very simple. Listen here. And the world started listening and discussing
why Europe is lagging behind the United States. And this has been going on for 2 or 3 decades already. I think what interests me, watching Trump over the past few years, is that Europe now knows this. They are accepting his claim that cutting taxes, reducing regulations, and canceling the Green New Deal will benefit both the United States and Europe. Globalist institutions like the International Monetary Fund are confirming this too, so I think he has a receptive audience. Well, of course, the speech was full of jabs at one country or another. He especially attacked Switzerland, which, since they are the hosts of this forum, was quite an interesting move. Well, I think that, of course, what the market is reacting to is, yes, the rejection of the idea that we're going to invade Greenland. And I thought that was actually an interesting argument. Why do we, to some extent, have a right to Greenland by saving Europe and Denmark from the Nazis, and then essentially having sovereignty over Greenland and returning it?
By the way, I didn't know that after liberating Denmark and that part of Europe from the Nazis, the United States also took over Greenland from Germany. Well, they gave it back to Denmark later. Interesting, isn't it?
This is easy to prove. Just look at the map to see the Russian missile installations. Greenland blocks the way for the United States and acts as a buffer. So I think it was effective. Sorry he took so long and rambled, but that's just what he does.
So, historically and also strategically and also it's a pity, out of goodwill, Europe should have given Greenland to the United States. So here's what Trump said. NATO loves Trump. It can't live without Trump. And here are Trump and the Secretary General of NATO.
We raised gross domestic product from 2 to 5%. This was done together jointly. I think everything turned out really well, and we appreciate it. Mark, so we're going to talk about different things. We'll talk about Greenland. I think that might come up in our discussion. And so, in general, I think the trip has been just amazing so far. It's been incredible. As you know, we're staying here, and tomorrow we'll have completely different things to do.
Notice it was an amazing visit. I mean, well, that's how it turned out, said Trump. So before that, the Secretary General and I, we achieved a lot together. Together, not just me getting something from NATO, but together with him, together. And here's what NATO thinks about Trump.
Basically, to make the Europeans and Canada really step up. And this led to the huge success that we achieved in The Hague. With 5%, it's crucial for protection and to match United States payments. This issue dates back to Eisenhower. I always tell Europeans you are fully committed to NATO, but there is one annoying factor, and that's the fact that Europeans haven't paid as much as the United States has. We solved that, which is important since we need money for protection. I heard something from you yesterday and today. You weren't absolutely sure that Europeans would come to the aid of the United States if you were attacked?
So, in other words, Trump expressed doubt that Europe would rush to help the United States if the need arises. That was Trump reacting to Macron's outcry from that very Steimer to their hysteria. So the Chancellor of Germany quickly came to his senses. By the way, those two liberals got carried away and, well, as they say, got so carried away they wet themselves. And now what Trump said after that conversation with the NATO leadership, not only with the Secretary General, but also with a number of military officials. The Greenland decision is final.
We have breaking news. President Trump stated that he has, quote, the framework of a deal on Greenland. He wrote on TRUTH Social, quote, as a result of a very productive meeting with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, we have formed the basis for a future deal regarding Greenland and, in fact, the entire Arctic region. This decision, if implemented, will be excellent for the United States of America and all NATO countries. Based on this understanding, I will not impose the tariffs that were supposed to take effect on February 1st.
So Europe and NATO offered something to Trump, which we don't know exactly yet. Yes, approximately. I'll give you a rough estimate closer to the end. Trump agreed to it. Well, the details are still being worked out, of course. We don't know. Did he agree to what he originally wanted or to what he was able to get? But it really looks like he got exactly what he wanted, and how he did it is a different story. But what we've gotten, we're clearly getting more than what we have now. And the most interesting thing is we won't be raising tariffs on Europeans, which we weren't planning to do anyway. We said we would, but we weren't going to. And in turn, Europe won't be canceling the trade agreement with us, which is beneficial for us, and we really wouldn't want it to be canceled.
Based on this understanding, I will not be introducing the tariffs that were supposed to take effect on February 1st. This is important because one of the reasons why the European leaders who spoke in Davos were so angry is that when they supported Denmark in this conflict and said, hey, the United States has no rights to Greenland, it has been Danish territory since the 1080s. The president this weekend just said, if that's what you think, then I'll impose 10% tariffs on half a dozen European countries in February and then another 25% tariff in the summer. And this really angered the European leaders who had spent most of the year negotiating at the president's request for a new trade agreement to lower tariffs. And so, yes, they will feel relieved that these tariffs will not be imposed. But they will also likely argue that this diplomacy of threats is not the best way to carry on and to strengthen the United States-European relationship.
In a way, she is right, but Trump has already proven so many times that he understands human nature, human psychology better than the experts. Practically all the experts. You always have to assume when Trump acts that he is following his own script and, by the way, achieving the best conditions and outcomes for us. He does this for America, not for himself. Ukraine was not the central topic at Davos, but it was clearly present there, and of course, people talked about it, and Trump said something about it. So, as journalists said, it hit or struck the world on the head, the world in Ukraine.
Well, I don't want to say it, but I thought it would be, I settled more than 8 wars and thought this would be one of the easier ones, not the easiest. Some I settled in just a few hours because I'm good at this. You know, the United Nations should be dealing with this. I shouldn't be doing it, but it doesn't matter. It has to be done. We're saving a lot of lives, saving millions. Ukraine, Russia. There is a huge hatred between President Zelensky and President Putin. It's not good. It's not good. That's for settling. We know from experience there's abnormal hatred there. Based on that, I think Russia wants to make a deal. I think Ukraine wants to make a deal, and we're going to try to make a deal. We're working on it, I think, Steve. I can say that we're pretty close. Often we have a deal with Russia. Russia's ready, but President Zelensky won't do it. You saw that when he was in the Oval Office. I wasn't happy. President Zelensky may want a deal, but Putin may not. Negotiating a deal is delicate and serious. It's just, you know, in one word, it's a real bloodbath. Terrible. What's happening now is a drone war. Drones are killing, you know, thousands of people every week, thousands. We have to stop this. So I believe they're at that stage now. I'm going to meet with President Zelensky later today. I believe they're at the stage now where they can come together and make a deal. And if they don't, they're being foolish.
That's what shocked the world. And if they don't reach an agreement, they're idiots. Especially since Trump and Putin don't like each other at all. With all the people you need to negotiate with and get something from them, say some nasty things. And him? The first time he said idiots, really. But then he started saying that, of course, he's not an idiot. Yeah, well, okay, listen, it's simple and clear. There are jerks, donkeys, dumb fools, idiots, morons. Well, of course. What is Putin really afraid of if he ends the war without a brilliant victory? Well, naturally, that's a huge obstacle to ending the war. On the other hand, this means ensuring security for Zelensky and his inner circle. That means that none of them will be imprisoned for theft, corruption, and large-scale fraud. Well, they won't be imprisoned, they won't be shot, they won't be quartered, they won't be torn to pieces. As soon as the great leaders of the two brotherly states figure out how to solve these problems, Putin's and Zelensky's, well, Putin, his circle, Zelensky and his circle. Obviously, we're talking about a collective level of Putin and Zelensky, not just these specific people. Then there will be peace in Eastern Europe. As soon as they solve these two problems, there will be peace in Eastern Europe. Well, of course, they also talk quite a bit about Greenland. A huge block of ice.
Only the United States can protect this vast landmass, this gigantic chunk of ice, develop it, improve it, and make it good for Europe, safe for Europe, and good for us. Let me give you another example of how Trump tries to explain why we need Greenland and why Denmark, in a way, is not really relevant to this conversation. In 2019, Denmark announced that it would spend more than $200 million to strengthen Greenland's defense. But as you know, they spent less than 1% of that amount, 1%. There are no signs of Denmark there, and I say this with great respect for Denmark, whose people I love, whose leaders are very good. Only the United States alone is capable of protecting this giant landmass, this huge piece of ice. To develop it, improve it, and make it beneficial for Europe, safe for Europe, and beneficial for us. That is why I am seeking immediate negotiations to once again discuss the acquisition of Greenland by the United States, just as we have acquired many other territories throughout our history.
And what I just told you surprised me.
We returned Greenland to Denmark. How foolish we were to do that, but we did it. We gave it back. And now how ungrateful they are. So now our country and the world are facing much greater risks than ever before because of missiles, nuclear weapons, and other advanced military technology I can't even mention. 2 weeks ago, they saw weapons that no one had ever heard of before. They couldn't do anything. Not a single shot was fired at us. They asked what happened. Everything was disoriented. They said, yes, we have them in our sights. Pull the trigger, and nothing happened. Not a single anti-aircraft missile took off. One of them rose about 30 feet and crashed right next to those who launched it. They said, what the hell is going on here? Those very same defense systems were made by Russia and China. They'll need to start over at home. Well, Dimatorzok.
Subtitles Dimatorzok. She has to take off first to fly to Mar-a-Lago, otherwise there's no way to go anywhere.
Greenland is a vast, almost completely uninhabited and totally undeveloped territory, which is left defenseless in an extremely important strategic position between the United States, Russia, and China. That's exactly where it is, right in the center.
What happened there in Davos? Why has Trump's speech already been called epoch-making? Larry Kudlow explains. I told you who Larry is. He's a serious economist. He worked for Trump. He had his own shows, a bunch of them. He's an economist, an advisor, and so on. Well, let's listen.
So a quick improvisation. Only Trump in Davos could have saved Europe from themselves. That's the topic of the improvisation. President Trump reportedly gave one of his best speeches in Davos. Today, America First is a vision of economic security, where economic security at home is the key to national security abroad. I love this topic. It's almost a direct echo of Ronald Reagan. More than 45 years ago, when the United States significantly outperformed the Soviet Union in production and made it impossible for communism to match our prosperity or our military power. Most people in Davos will never admit it, but Trump's vision will save the West if they just stop talking and let him do it, of course. He said he would not use force to deal with his concerns about Greenland and the Golden Dome and saving the West. Here's a quote. "I don't need to use force. I don't want to use force. I will not use force." He said this about halfway through his speech. The idea that Donald Trump would open fire on his own allies could only have been invented by some completely crazy far-left media freaks who had been trying to blow up the issue for weeks. Out of a truly very serious issue, namely the defense of the United States, the Western Hemisphere, and the NATO alliance from encroachments by Russia and China.
I'll repeat myself, but I'll say it again. Ukraine was not preparing for defense and was caught off guard. In fact, this was already Russia's second invasion in 2022. Europe was and still is asleep, and when it wakes up, it shouts some nonsense with a hangover like, "We won't give something up, our rights are there, invaders are there," and so on and so forth, and beer, and it all mixes together, then it goes back to bed again. Honestly, I think they have no money left for anything except cheap vodka. They're very pleased with themselves, and then they go back to bed. I remember how people in Italy told me that in the United States we don't know how to enjoy life, but Italians do. They work half days, 4 days a week, and live better than we do. It's just amazing. Well, okay, I listened, of course, and looked at their cramped little apartments, those so-called homes. The creaking floors and doors, the rotting, I'm not even sure, the rusty bikes of the poor around the corner from expensive stores. And I really wanted to go back to my, well, functioning America, boring, working America that supposedly doesn't know how to have fun. So it seems that the American mentality suits me better. I also don't really know how to relax like that. Well, I just can't relax among bedbugs.
If you look at any map, you'll see that Greenland is actually part of the Western Hemisphere, with a potential missile flight from Moscow to Washington, District of Columbia, passing over Greenland. If we go back to his original statement, Truth Social has already been there for several days. I quoted Mr. Trump as saying that the United States of America is immediately ready to negotiate with Denmark or with any industry from those countries. But no one wanted to listen to me. No one wanted to read what he wrote. No one wanted to quote him. So you got crazy news headlines today, in my opinion, the morning edition of the Wall Street Journal on the front page. Has the United States lost its way? Or is Axios talking about the end of the United States-led world order? Listen, alliances can change, partnerships can change, but this was just outrageous several times. Today's speech at Davos. Mr. Trump has again confirmed his willingness to negotiate. And indeed, shortly after that, after meeting with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, Mr. Trump announced, "We have laid the groundwork for a future deal regarding Greenland and, essentially, the entire Arctic region. This is the art of the deal, and it will be a great deal for all NATO countries," wrote Mr. Trump. He will not impose the tariffs that were supposed to take effect on February 1st. J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio will work on this with Steve Witkoff. This is the art of the deal. The stock markets have surged strongly. Trump's leadership is saving the day once again. He also wants to add, he's talking again about the importance of economic growth and why it doesn't cause inflation. This is important. He shed light on his upcoming announcement about the future Federal Reserve Chair. So I'll just continue to be skillful. I'll have to repeat this once again. Regardless of what Europeans think or don't think, Donald Trump and his policy, America First, is the only thing that will save them from themselves.
China and Canada are inevitable. Canadian socialists were frightened by Trump's rhetoric and actions, his refusal to protect them for free, and his attempt to take Greenland. So if that happens, Canada will have all its borders only with the United States, that's it. That's why the social fascists of Canada decided to call for help from the communist fascists of China. The idea is this. Besides you, America, we have other options too. For example, China will buy our oil and we will get Chinese electric cars. Well, basically what colonizers did in the colonies 200 years ago, they brought beads, crystal pots, and in return got gold, minerals, ivory, and valuable types of wood. Now China will work with Canada on the same principle. You give us oil and timber, and we give you beads and electric pots. In this case, I think Carney, the Prime Minister of Canada, has gone too far. They misunderstood something again. We'll take two provinces from them, Alberta and what's it called, Sitkavani, where the main oil reserves are located. We'll surround them with our borders. We'll stop buying their goods altogether, and the remaining provinces there will just suffocate.
Dallas's conclusions. In a state of complete collapse, just 2 hours after Trump's speech in Davos, the deal was reached. It was called the Speech of the Year, and it fully met expectations. We have some key points, but let's start with breaking news.
The deal will be announced soon.
And we'll see, it's still a bit in progress. It's moved along quite a bit.
It gives us everything
that we needed to get. The deal will be announced pretty soon. It gives us everything we needed, says the president. Does this mean that the United States is acquiring Greenland? No, we won't acquire it, but this deal gives the United States sovereignty over parts of Greenland to set up military bases. This agreement apparently has already been approved by Denmark. The president canceled his tariff threats after this agreement was reached, which triggered a major rally in the market. The New York Times reports on a deal reached at the NATO meeting between President Trump, Secretary General Rutte, and top military officials of alliance members. It reported on a compromise under which Denmark would grant the United States sovereignty over small areas of Greenland land where the United States could build military bases. Sovereignty means this is American territory. The Times notes that the deal is comparable to the United Kingdom's bases in Cyprus, which are considered British territory. So, after a week of non-stop hyperbole, with Democrats and the press in a panic saying this is the end of United States hegemony, the end of NATO, World War III is here, they said, and all that. They look pretty foolish now, especially after we've seen the same scenario over and over again. Trump the negotiator, that's how he does business.
The United States got the pieces of Greenland territory we needed strategically. Behind the scenes, of course, there were negotiations about rights to rare earths, oil, minerals, and setting up factories and processing plants, as well as AI hubs, the hubs. In Russian, I guess it would be on the territory of Greenland, either on our part or the Danish part. I honestly don't know. But there will be a small American part there and a large Danish part. God bless them. Greenland has the option to leave Denmark. It can look left and right and say, we're tired of this, we're leaving Denmark. Either become independent or join the United States, which is exactly what Albert wants to do, right? And so Saskatchewan, I hope I pronounced his name correctly. Finally, just as Venezuelans, Mexicans, Iranians, and many others would dream of. So, another saga has ended, another Trump victory, another Trump victory, another lesson in diplomacy for the world, another reason to be proud of our president. Until we meet again, friends, or in other words, until new victories.